Today on the show, we'll be talking about a couple of new-to-me movies, starting with The Gray Man from 2022, and then I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore from 2017. Yes, that's the actual title of the movie. All right, everyone. Welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. Thank you for tuning in. I do appreciate it. I wanted to talk really quick about something that I hold very near and dear to my heart in the movie and book and basically any kind of media, other than, I guess, music. You can't really do this to music, but I wanted to talk about spoilers and just basically give kind of an understanding of what my feelings on spoilers are and what makes something, necessary to say, hey, this is a spoiler alert for this thing or whatever. I mean, just any of these concepts I'd really like to get into. So the basic idea of a spoiler is that, if you haven't seen, and for my examples, I'll just use movies as an example because it's the easiest for me to relate to. Obviously, you can spoil a book or a TV show just as easily, but if you're about to watch a movie, or you might even just be considering watching a movie at some point, if just because that movie has been out for a long time does not give people free rein to tell you what happens in that movie and give away major plot points, because personally, I don't believe that that's really fair to them. I mean, they should have the right to be able to watch it without knowing all of that stuff up front, because it kind of ruins something. It takes something away from that movie for them, and they just don't. It doesn't make any sense to me to, I remember one time, somebody was complaining about, when Game of Thrones was on the air and someone had spoiled something that was in one of the books for Game of Thrones. Stephen King tweeted and said, these books have been out for like 25, 30 years. I don't see what the problem is. And it's like, okay, Stephen King, how about this? How about nobody buys any of your books or watches any of the movies your books are based on for the rest of your career because they're older than 25 years? I mean, there is no statute of limitations on spoilers. If you're going to give away a major plot point to a movie or TV show, I mean, you better be damn sure that if somebody is or is not in the know about that and whether or not they're willing to hear about it, because that's the hardest part. It's like you really can't be too careful. And so it's like, for instance, with my podcast, the way I look at it is you might as well think of all of my episodes as being full of spoilers unless otherwise noted on the release of the podcast episode. It's completely reasonable to think that, there are going to be spoilers. I'm talking about movies pretty in depth. I'm not going to be able to dance around certain plot points the entire time. At the same time, there are a lot of episodes where you might have thought I was going to spoil a lot, but then I kind of act like I'm trying to avoid it. And it's only on a case-by-case basis. It's like, if I can get away with not causing that problem, if I can get away with not having a spoiler, I might just do that. But a lot of times that's just not the case. So when I was, for instance, if I note that it's, no spoilers, then obviously that's what that means. I did the episode Thor Love and Thunder where I just talked about that one movie and I had just seen it in theaters and it had just come out and I talked about it at great length, but I did not dive into what the major plot was or any of the major plot points or anything like that. And I mean, it's tempting to do because it's a lot easier to discuss, but I think if you're going to be a good reviewer, you've got to be able to do it either way, So that's the way that is. So, I mean, if I talk about anything, if I'm talking about it, basically, I want you to think to yourself, what is this review? Does it say anything about not having spoilers? No? Okay. Because every other movie podcast I watch, or I should say listen to, I don't have any spoiler warnings, and they are full of spoilers, you know what I mean? So I took a page out of their book, and I went ahead and just assumed that was how things were, that was the norm, so I just went with that. So I will start off by saying that I watched the movie Gray Man for today's episode, and I really enjoyed it. I think you should check it out, and that's the most recommendation I can possibly give you without giving anything away. And then also, I don't feel at home in this world anymore. Also, very great. Highly recommend it. Worth your time, in my opinion. And again, obviously everybody's taste is going to be different. There are people that dislike one movie or like another movie, and that doesn't always align with everybody else, of course. It is what it is. You just kind of have to find that balance and just talk it out and just, try and figure out like, okay, I'm looking at this movie and it's like, I don't really think it looks that good. And then just go from there. So I'm doing the service of, I watched these two movies that I'm covering today for the first time recently, and one of them's really new and then the other one's kind of old, but I don't think I've heard a lot of people talk about the older one, which is I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. And I feel like it'd be better to just explain what I feel about these movies before really diving into a review. Usually I'll wait until last to say, hey, this is how I felt about this movie or whatever. But in this case, that's not how I feel about it at all. So, diving right in, we have The Gray Man from July 22nd, 2022, directed by the Russo brothers. And you've probably seen some Russo brothers movies. If you're not familiar, they did some TV work, which they worked on Arrested Development, Community, and Happy Endings. 3 shows that I absolutely adore, actually. I was very pleased to see that was on their filmography. And then, moving on to movies, they started off with Yumi and Dupree, and I can't honestly say I've ever seen or wanted to see that movie, but you got to start somewhere, I guess. They did the second Captain America movie, Captain America Winter Soldier, and then they continued to do Captain America Civil War, which is arguably one of, if not the best Marvel movies ever. And then they did the third and fourth Avengers movies, so Infinity War and Endgame, and they have a movie called Cherry that I want to check out. I don't know what it is. I've never really heard much about it, but I kept seeing it on their filmography, and I was like, all right, let's see what that's all about. And so I'll probably put that on the old, list of movies to watch. And so the writers for this movie are a writing team, the last names of Marcus and McFeely, and they worked on a lot of the Chronicles of Narnia movies, which I never really saw because I didn't really like the books, and or I should say the first book that I read, and I stopped there. They wrote all 3 Captain America movies, Thor: The Dark World, Pain and Gain, Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, and then they also worked with the Russo brothers on Infinity War and Endgame as well. And so I would say that they have a pretty decent resume in hand. Nobody really stood out as producers as like having had a lot of good movies under their belt, so we won't get into those. The composer of this movie honestly has probably too many movies under his belt to name, but it's Henry Jackman, and I'll just list a few, I guess 5 to 10 of them, because he does have a lot and I want to get a good representation of what work he has done. But he did the score for Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, Wreck-It Ralph, Kick-Ass 2, Captain Phillips, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Big Hero 6, Kingsman: The Secret Service, Captain America Civil War, and just honestly, to go any farther than that, look the guy up. Henry Jackman, he's fucking solid. I don't know if he's any relation to Hugh, I don't think so, but then we've got, for our first, our main character, our lead actor is Ryan Gosling, who the more movies I watch with Ryan Gosling, the more I think he might be one of, if not my most favorite actor out there right now. Everything he touches turns to gold. He's the reason that I might consider going to see that fucking Barbie movie, or at least checking it out on video when it gets released. But anyway, his character in this movie is named Sierra 6, and I'll kind of get into why his name is weird. He was in Remember the Titans. I believe his character was gay in Remember the Titans. Anyway, Remember the Titans is a solid fucking movie. You should really give it a shot. The Notebook. Okay. A girl I used to date, her and I made her watch a movie that I liked, and so she insisted that we check out The Notebook, right? And I'm watching this movie, I like Rachel McAdams an awful lot, like More Than a Friend, and I like Ryan Gosling an awful lot, like More Than a Friend, and I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, at the end, it's like, the girl I was watching it with, she was like, oh, isn't that mom just awful? Isn't she just terrible? I was like, yeah, but, and spoilers for The Notebook, but I was like, why did Ryan Gosling keep sending letters to Rachel McAdams' residence? Her parents' house is where he's sending these letters. What was he expecting the mom to do? It's like he's putting his fucking return address on it. The mom has every reason to know that Ryan Gosling is the guy that's sending these fucking letters. Why? Anyway, I'll move on. I didn't think The Notebook was as good as people had said, and I had heard people, like guys, even say, actually, I don't like chick flicks, but that Notebook's a pretty solid movie. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, Ryan Gosling was in Lars and the Real Girl, Blue Valentine, Crazy Stupid Love, which I really enjoy, Drive, which is fucking phenomenal, and I will probably do the movie on this podcast. It's that fucking good. He was in The Big Short, which that's another fucking amazing movie. He was in The Nice Guys, which is a solid little, buddy action flick. La La Land with Emma Stone, which not my cup of tea, but I could see where people would like it. He was in Blade Runner 2049. And he was in First Man, which I still need to check out, which is the Neil Armstrong story. And then we have number 2 in line. The co-star is Chris Evans, who plays a man named Lloyd Hansen. And, Wikipedia's initial blurb talks about Chris Evans and his work, and they mention the Marvel movies he's been in, and then they specifically call out by name his work as Johnny Storm / the Human Torch in Fantastic Four, but they don't mention Captain America until paragraphs farther down the page, right? And I'm just like, okay, people know him as Captain America. They don't fucking even give a shit that he was the Human Torch, but okay. He was in Not Another Teen Movie, which is a personal favorite of mine. It really does, it does wonders of making fun of all those fucking teen movies from the 80s and 90s. He was in Cellular, not a terrible movie. He's in Fantastic Four, as I mentioned. He was one of the 7 evil X's from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Obviously, he played Captain America. He was in Snowpiercer, which is a fucking solid movie. Definitely check that one out. Knives Out, another fucking spectacular movie. Really liked Knives Out. Kind of a whodunit type movie, and it really hammered it home. I really loved it. He was also in Don't Look Up. He played Buzz Lightyear in the movie Lightyear, which I guess was apparently nothing special because it really got pretty polarized, mediocre reviews, and not everybody was a big fan. And he's got a movie coming out that's called Ghosted that I kind of want to see. Chris Evans does. And moving right along, Ana de Armas is in this movie, who I have noted here, she is hot, and she plays the character Danny Miranda, which is an interesting name. She was in War Dogs. That's the first movie I really remember her standing out as, being a decently large role in. She was in Blade Runner 2049. She was in Knives Out. No Time to Die. She was in that movie for, I don't know, 10 minutes at the very fucking most. She really didn't have jack shit to do in the movie, and she was gone. And she's also in that movie Ghosted with Chris Evans that's coming out next year or something. But it should be good. I think it could be good. Billy Bob Thornton is the only other actor in this movie that I know by name just to look at him without looking him up. He plays Donald Fitzroy in this movie, but he was also in Sling Blade, Armageddon, The Man Who Wasn't There, which I wasn't a big fan fan of, Bad Santa, and Friday Night Lights, okay? And just a couple of casting notes before I dive into the actual plot. This movie was originally in development as early as 2011, and originally there was a different director that was going to be attached to this, and then Brad Pitt was supposed to be in the lead role, and obviously that didn't happen. It ended up, being in production limbo, and then there was talk that they were going to change directors again, and they were going to swap the gender of the lead character and make Charlize Theron be the lead character, and that didn't end up happening. And then they finally, got the Russo brothers involved, and they started to develop it, and they really wanted to develop this movie as like a potential franchise for Netflix. So we'll get into that in a little bit. And then, so the plot synopsis of this movie, this is the best I could do. A man in prison for what was arguably a justifiable homicide in his youth enters into an agreement to work for the CIA. That doesn't, like, that plot synopsis, I try and not be too spoilery. I'd like to be able to read something like that where it's like, okay, I find out that he is in prison and that he's going to work out an agreement to work for the CIA within, like, the first 5 minutes of this fucking movie. Like, there is no question that that's going to happen. So, when I do these plot synopses, I try and not give away too much. I like to give a blurb that it's like, you're not gonna fucking ruin the whole plot for me. You might ruin a surprise from the first 5 minutes of the movie. Whoopee shit. The start of this movie, you have got Billy Bob Thornton and Ryan Gosling in an interrogation room, and Billy Bob Thornton is wearing like a hairpiece or wig or whatever you want to call it, and he's been aged down quite a lot, okay? And you could just tell, and I'm like, why do they have Billy Bob Thornton aged down so much? Oh, that's right, they said it was in like 2002, so this is going to jump forward to the present, and they're going to need Billy Bob Thornton to be regularly aged. Okay. And the only thing that's weird about it is, like, Ryan Gosling, I always find it funny how they do it in movies, because it's very unevenly done, where it's like actors just decide, oh yeah, I can play, 20 years younger. Why not? I look exactly like I did 20 years ago. Who doesn't? And it's like with this, Ryan Gosling, they didn't even really do much to him that I could tell, and they just, or maybe it's just my vision, maybe they were working their magic and I just didn't realize it, but it's like they didn't do much to him. So anyway, Ryan Gosling enters into this agreement, and he's basically going to be able to get out of prison. He just has to work for the CIA, and that's it. That's the gist of it. And so I mean, it's basically like what you find out is Ryan Gosling like killed his dad because his dad was going to hurt his brother or something, so it's like, it's not like he's a bad guy, you know what I mean? It's not like he's a monster or something like that. It's like he was protecting his brother, and it just didn't fucking work out, it's just, so it's kind of shitty, but what can you do? I'm gonna break this ice right now. There are so many visually stunning elements of this movie. Everything to look at in this movie. If the plot was shit, I still could not take away the aspect of visual decadence in this movie. And when Gosling and Thornton are sitting there, they, like it's about to start the opening credits, and all of a sudden, as they're sitting there in the interrogation room, they turn into like an illustrated version of themselves, and it they're in a standstill type pose, and it's not like it's cartoonish, it's like it's just a drawing. It has such a cool effect, you know what I mean? It really is solid. I really fucking like it. And the way they were doing, I mean, it's like they bounce right from these fucking opening credits, and they go to this, I can't remember what city it was, but it's like they go there, and there are fireworks going off in the middle of the city, and the camera is flying by these fireworks, and it's just so fucking vivid. It's just fucking crisp as shit, man. It's fucking amazing. And so that, they're showing shots of these fireworks. They're really cool. And then I said, oh right, Ana de Armas is in this movie. Yes. And, I usually don't say stuff like that out loud because it doesn't sound as good as it does when you read it. But I'm saying, Ana de Armas, I'm on board. I would say that at several moments in this movie, the score reminds me of the Terminator, and I can't say if it's because the score, actually sounds like it, or if it's just because I just watched the Terminator a little bit ago, and that's why I'm thinking about it. I don't honestly have any idea. So this guy, basically, what gets the plot really moving in this movie is Ryan Gosling is supposed to kill this guy, and he doesn't know anything about who this guy is. He's just being told to kill him, and he's just gonna do it. But there are too many civilians in the way, and so Ryan Gosling can't kill the guy quickly enough, and he has to go up and take matters into his own hands and figure out a way to kill this guy some other way. And it's like, this guy, he turns out to be the guy from, I think it's the guy from Batman vs. Superman that is like always wearing sunglasses and has his hair slicked back. Like, it's just, I don't know. So it turns out that this guy is actually like another agent just like Ryan Gosling. Like, they're in the Sierra program. The guy that Gosling is going to kill is Sierra 4, and Ryan Gosling is Sierra 6. And so he doesn't find out until the guy is like literally dying that he's a Sierra. So he's kind of confused. He's trying to figure out why someone would want to kill a Sierra and all this stuff. And it's shortly, because this is like, I should have mentioned, this is shortly after the, what do you call it? After the opening credits, it says that they jumped forward like 18 years or something. And they show Billy Bob Thornton, and he is he was dark haired and, supposed to be young looking 18 years before, and he jumps forward and he is fully gray, full on Billy Bob Thornton in this fucking present day type situation where it's like, sure, aging can hit some people like a ton of bricks, like some people, it only takes that long to all of a sudden go that fucking gray, but it was just, I don't know, it was a little jarring to look at Billy Bob Thornton. I did not realize, because that's the benefit of not learning anything about these movies before you watch them, is that Chris Evans is the bad guy in this movie. And honestly, Chris Evans has been like a bad guy in other movies I've watched. He's been in Scott Pilgrim, and he was in Knives Out. He was not necessarily like an antagonist per se. He was more just like a member of this family that didn't have the best of interests of Ana de Armas's character at heart, so it's just the way it is. But I was really intrigued, because I was like, I want to see how Chris Evans does with a full-on villainous role. And it is, so the other thing I want to mention about Chris Evans is he has a mustache, and for some reason that makes it very, very easy to identify him as a villain. I don't know why that is, because facial hair is not necessarily going to make you look villainous, but to just have a mustache in this day and age is frequently the earmark of a villain type person. And one of the things I love best about this movie is like the action sequences. Just, there are so many cool fight sequences and car chases and explosions and different things like that. It just, everything is completely off the wall. It's honestly, it's on the level of like a Daniel Craig Bond movie where you've got all this shit going on, and the guy, the main guy has to fucking figure out what to do at a moment's notice and just fucking do it to save his own life. And it's like, holy shit, man, like I can get on board with this. But I was saying it's definitely very James Bond-esque. And honestly, I would say like Chris Evans doesn't get enough credit for his acting chops. I think he's a lot better actor than the world really gives him credit for. He has some pretty solid range. He has comedy chops. He has dramatic action. He can do a lot of different things. And I don't know if he's ever done horror, but I'll bet you he could be pretty good in horror as well. And Evans, it's like he has the whole way of talking, like the whole demeanor of the villain down pat. And I found out shortly into this movie that it was one of those newfangled movies that's told out of order. It bounces back like 2 years to talk about Billy Bob Thornton's niece and different things like that. And actually, the girl that plays Thornton's niece is a solid actress. She is really good, and she's got a good character, well written, acts like a smartass. It's all very, very awesome. I would say that this movie, at parts, as we're progressing into the movie, I think we're probably about a half an hour in as I'm talking about it. It feels a little all over the place, but that's not necessarily a knock against it. It's just a lot, it's hard to like kind of get in the right mood to keep paying attention and stuff. And I put on here because, so when I watch a movie, I don't ever read into unless I already know stuff about the movie, I don't read into anything. I don't find out about the director, the release date, the budget, the actors, anything if I can help it. I don't want to know any more about them than I possibly have to. And I said at one point that everyone has been stealing the Civil War location block letters, because they're, unlike a lot of movies, for the longest time, they would use small print at the bottom of the screen to denote where the scene was going to take place. And I didn't realize when I was typing that the Russo brothers made this movie, and the Russo brothers made Captain America Civil War, so they kind of have the right to use the giant block letters for the location across the screen. I honestly can't tell, and at one point, Chris Evans is after Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling has to try and get away from him, and Ana de Armas helps him, and then, every time I see her acting, I'm like, is she not a good actress, or is it just her accent? You know what I mean? Is it just that she has an accent and it just kind of makes her reading sound a little flat, I can't really tell. And it could be her looks. I mean, she's a really nice looking person, so I can't really fault her for distracting me. That is what it is. There's a moment where when Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling's characters meet, they kind of have an exchange, and apparently they tried to do a lot of improv on this movie. They wanted the two of them to improvise a lot of their lines. And Chris Evans, Ryan Gosling is like, "You must be Lloyd." And Chris Evans is like, "What gave it away?" And Ryan Gosling says, "The white pants, the trash stash, it leans Lloyd." And honestly, if that was improvised, that was fucking stellar. Like, it was a really funny line. And I would just say there are fight sequences every other scene in this fucking movie, and they're all fucking amazing to me. I love them. I thought they were really fucking good. I think Ryan Gosling, just based on this movie, he should play a villain at some point. He should get into it, and he should start to explore it. Because, I don't know if he has played a villain, but if he hasn't, that would be even more spectacular to see what abilities he has in that realm. There's a shot after Ana de Armas tells Gosling to get comfortable where they do a huge swooping shot that they must have used like a drone or something. They have after that one, they had quite a few of them that kept happening. And I was like, wow, this is really amazing to look at. And I really like what they do with the camera. But I wouldn't want to watch several movies like this. I'd only want it to be special with a couple of different movies and then draw the line there. You know what I mean? That would be for the best. There's a scene where Evans is removing Thornton's fingernails with a pair of pliers. And I felt like there would have been more blood, but I can't, honestly, I don't have any, you might not know this about me, but I don't have any fingernails. So the whole issue that caused my eye problems, the disease that I have, it caused me, when I was in the hospital, to lose my fingernails and toenails. And that's just, it is what it is, but I don't know what it's like to lose a fingernail by force. You know what I mean? And this movie is stunning to look at. And it's not just when Ana de Armas is on screen, or Ryan Gosling or Chris Evans, don't want to leave those guys out. Big shootout followed by a chase scene. And the score is feeling more Bondish by the minute. So, it transitions from being Terminator-y and dark to James Bondish, And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, there is a very serious similarity between the two types of scores. I was enamored every time they would do one of these swooping shots with the camera. They kept, you'd see them every once in a great while. It would be like, oh, hey, this is happening. This is what's going on. This is how they're going to do this. And you can tell that there are limitations, because I'll bet you that there are certain things they would have corrected about the way they got those drone shots on the camera. But they all looked really, really cool. And okay, let me ask this question, and this is good. Okay, so I was gonna say that I love the playful banter between Gosling and Ana de Armas, but I was gonna refer to Ana de Armas by her last name. Now, do I say de Armas or do I just say Armas? I think it's a lowercase d, de Armas. I think it's de Armas. Okay, well, I'll probably just call her Ana de Armas if I'm gonna go that far. So, the two of them should 100% date in real life if they're not already dating people. And as we're progressing through this movie, you know, what I will say as a kind of knock against this movie is that it's not, they're doing too much. They're almost piling it on too heavily to help keep your focus. And it's like, I don't really care for that personally. It's not my cup of tea, but I just, I found it difficult to follow at times. And then it was like, I tried to look at the fucking Wikipedia page. And by the way, never look at a Wikipedia page that is for a movie that has like just come out and they haven't ironed out the wrinkles, because I go to look at the fucking plot line and there is nothing that you get halfway through the plot and it's just completely incoherent. And I don't mean in a sense of like just being able to understand the fundamental basic concepts of the plot. I mean, like, it's incoherent in the words that they chose do not actually group together to form sentences or complete thoughts or anything. And it fucking throws me off every fucking time. You know, I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but basically you get down towards the end of the movie. You've had a lot of exciting sequences and there's rarely a dull moment. And finally, Chris Evans has Billy Bob Thornton's niece and Ryan Gosling has come to save her. And Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling have like a hand-to-hand fight. Like they just fight each other without weapons, or at least initially without weapons. I mean, it's a really fucking compelling fight in my opinion. I think it looks really good. They choreographed it really well and it doesn't look shitty or anything. And I mean, honestly, it was one of the more watchable fights I've seen on screen. And I'm not surprised that they've already announced, like I hadn't even finished the movie, but I was not even surprised that they had already announced that there was going to be a sequel and a spin-off for this movie. They also, I mean, they did a pretty decent job setting up those sequels, so that also helps. My closing thought for this movie, because they play a song at the end and I don't even remember what it was, but my thought was, you ever hear a song that sounds really good in a movie, so you put it on a playlist and then you just skip it every time it comes up in the rotation? I want to think of a name for that. I want to find like a classic example of that and use that as like oh yeah, you know, you're doing that, you know. So big highlights and praise: cinematography, the camera work that they are doing in this movie is unparalleled in my opinion. It is very experimental, I guess I want to say. There is rarely a slow spot in this movie, and it delivers consistently on some great action. I couldn't ask for anything more. And then we've got, you know, the terrific leading cast, which, I mean, the four actors I named, they were the only ones that I recognized by name, you know, that when I saw them on screen, I immediately knew who they were, and I'm okay with that. Criticism is, you know, one of the criticisms is that, you know, that there aren't more actors in this movie that I know, and then this may just be me being dumb, but I found it a little hard to keep up with. I didn't feel like, especially with the jumping around of the timeline, I found it harder to stay on track with what the plot was and to keep up with it. I've got an IMDb nugget because, first, Chris Evans was originally going to play the lead in this movie. This is trivia, obviously. He was going to play the lead, but he decided he wanted to play the villain, which is interesting if it's true. And then the IMDb nugget that I found, that I always try and find these shitty IMDb trivia examples where they've taken a bit of information and represented it as trivia, and it's just nothing of the sort. So this one's a bit of a long one, but when Claire, aka Julia Butters, asks Six, Ryan Gosling, what his tattoo means, He answers, it's the Greek name of a man who pushes a rock up a mountain. He refers to Sisyphus, a figure in Greek mythology who was punished by the gods. His punishment was rolling a boulder up the mountain for eternity, with the rock rolling down every time he was nearly at the top. This can be seen as a metaphor for Six's career, nameless hit after hit, without ever truly getting anywhere. That's not trivia, guys. That's not an interesting I mean, like, to leave it at, okay, that's Sisyphus, that's fine. I can accept that being a little shitty piece of trivia because you wanted to contribute. I get that. But to say that this can be seen as, like a metaphor for Ryan Gosling's character and blah, blah, it's just, no, is the word I want, conjecture. You're conjecturing that, you're drawing that conclusion yourself, but that's not fact, and trivia should at least at the very basic level be fact. Runtime of this movie, 129 minutes. Budget, $200 million. Worldwide gross was $322,000, but this is a brand new movie and it's being released on Netflix, so I don't know how you measure the amount of revenue or whatever that they supposedly think they're getting. It only has an IMDb rating of 6.5, which I was pretty disappointed by. The Rotten Tomato critics score is 46%. The Rotten Tomato audience score is 91%. And that doesn't shock me. It had a personal rating for me of 4.5 out of 5 stars. Just a little overloaded plot, I think, and just too much bouncing around with the timeline, and it just kind of made it a little difficult to keep up with. But that's my burden, that's just how I look at it. So yeah, I would definitely say it's worth checking out. The next movie we've got is called, hold your breath for this one, I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I mean, it's quite a few words long, and I think they could have just said, I don't feel at home, or something like that. But anyway, it came out on February 24th, 2017, directed by a man named Macon Blair. It was his directorial debut, and unfortunately, it does not look as though he's directed any other features since this movie came out. He also wrote the movie, and producers and the score, nobody that I had ever heard of or had wiki pages came up for me, so I was just like, all right, screw it, not talking about those. Features in the lead role Melanie Lynskey. Okay, she plays Ruth, and she was on 2.5 Men as Rose, who is I think a crazy neighbor of Charlie Sheen's that she had a one night stand with him, years ago, and she's obsessed with him, and she comes over to visit and climbs over the balcony railing to go home. I don't know. It's kind of okay, I guess, if you like 2.5 Men. She was in Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, another too long titled movie, which was okay. I watched it and covered it on the blog, Brandon at randomreviews.com. I liked it okay. She was in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is a classic example of the book being better than the movie, but the movie being pretty fucking close to as good as the book, She was also in Don't Look Up. I mean, who the fuck wasn't in that movie at this point? Second in line is the better known Elijah Wood, who plays the character Tony. And Elijah Wood has been in The Good Son. He was in a movie called North, which was a Rob Reiner movie that I saw in theater. And if I recall correctly, it was trash. He was in the movie Flipper in the 90s with Paul Hogan, who is Crocodile Dundee. He was in the Lord of the Rings movies. I loved Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind that he was in. He was solid in that movie. He played a good part. He's great in Sin City, albeit very quiet and creepy. And then he was in that show Wilfred, and I don't know if he's probably, it seems like he's been in other stuff, but those those few things stick out to me as ones that I remember him being in. I don't have any real casting notes because there wasn't really much for a background on this movie, but the plot synopsis I came up with is as follows. A woman, fed up with the inconsiderate nature of people everywhere she goes, has her home burglarized. That gives, like I say, you find that out pretty fucking early in this movie that she gets burglarized, and that's it. You know what I mean? That's all you really have to get into with it. It's I want it to be basic. So the only thing I know about her, I didn't remember her from a lot of other movies. So it's centered around her. She's the lead character. She's this Ruth, and so it kind of opens up with a scene at a bar where she's sitting there and she's reading a book, and the guy sitting next to her is Macon Blair, who is the director and writer of this movie. He asked her, "Oh, are you reading this, that book series?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's so good, blah blah blah," and she's talking about it, and the guy immediately basically gives away a huge fucking plot point to the movie, or not to the movie, to the book. And it's she's just God fucking damn, because she's talking about it with him casually, and she kind of gets this false sense of security that she's going to be able to talk about it and he's not going to, blow anything in the plot wide open. And then out of nowhere, he's just well, this is what's going on with that, right? And she's like, "No, I didn't realize that, how the fuck would I have?" And I mean, I honestly, I don't care. Like I said earlier, I don't care how long a movie or a book has been out. Don't fucking spoil it. I don't give a shit. My God, it's fucking terrible. I would say that I didn't look up what kind of car she actually has, but it's a cool classic car, I think it's like a Chevy Camaro or something, but I really liked the look of it. I mean, it was a little run down, but it was pretty sweet. She gets robbed at her house, and while she's away, and they take medication from her laptop, and her grandmother's silver, and she obviously has a very sentimental spot for her grandmother, which a lot of people do. And she calls the police, and the police kind of take her information and understand what's been stolen, and they're basically not, it's pretty clear that they're not gonna do fucking anything, and it's what, okay, so she's kind of going around, and she's talking to these different people in her neighborhood to explain to them what's happened. She's trying to figure out if they know of anybody or if they've seen anybody that could be up to something. And I mean, there's just throughout the beginning of this movie especially, there is this continuing narrative of people being assholes and being inconsiderate and, not giving a shit and all that stuff. And it's just, it is what it is, it's it's tough not to look at people through that lens, where you think that they're pieces of shit, but it is what it is. I don't know. I mean, and there's a moment where I think it's her sister is Ruth goes over to her sister's house, and she's reading her niece a story or, a book of some sort, and she's talking to her sister, and Ruth is talking about what assholes all these people are, and her sister says, "You're doing a lot better than a lot of people, right?" And I don't know if you know this, but there's something called the fallacy of relative privation, that you don't necessarily feel better just because other people are worse off. You know what I mean? If I feel hungry and I say I want to eat something and I'm starving, if you turn to me and tell me that there are starving people in China, does that mean I'm going to be less hungry, or does that just mean that I'm going to be still as hungry, but now feeling like shit about it? Don't do the fallacy of relative privation thing. It's not a good look. But everyone is an asshole, is what Ruth says. And I'm yes, don't let her tell you that they aren't. So she gets fed up, when this happens, and somebody is walking their dog, and they let their dog poop on the front lawn, and there's a little sign that says no poop, and she takes a piece of paper towel or plastic or something, and she picks up the turd and throws it at the guy walking the dog, and the guy walking the dog turns around, and it's Elijah Wood. And I said, she just threw a turd at hipster Frodo Baggins. Awesome. She's conducting her own investigation. She pours liquid rubber into this shoe print in her backyard, and all these neighbors that she asks about it are, they're not helpful really, and some of them are trying to hit on her and stuff. And so at some point, her device finder on her phone kicks on, and it shows that someone is using her laptop, and she has like an exact address and all this stuff. And she calls the police to tell them, and they basically tell her that they can put it in the file, but they can't actually go to that residence because they need a warrant to do that. And it seems like that's probably accurate. Like I don't doubt it for a minute. And it's at this point she's interacted with Elijah Wood a couple of times, and after she throws the shit at him, she goes and she doesn't realize that where he lives, and she just goes and happens upon him in the backyard, and they're talking for a minute. And Elijah Wood, the character he's playing this guy that's like into martial arts and shit like that, and like all that mall ninja shit. And it's just I think he's really fucking good in this movie, honestly. I would say my personal opinion was that this movie is a spiritual sequel to God Bless America, which didn't really have anybody familiar name-wise, but it was just like this movie about this guy who gets fed up with people and their shit, and him and this younger girl go on like a fucking rampage. It reminded me a lot of that movie, but the director said that he considered it a bit of a, like a similar thing, but with Falling Down with Michael Douglas, which is a fucking solid movie. I really like I honestly, probably later on we'll cover that in this podcast. Falling Down, it's a Joel Schumacher movie, and I fucking love it. I mean, but I didn't even think about it when the movie was going on. And so she's figured out, what this guy's shoe print looks like, and we end up seeing what this guy looks like, and he's a real fucking scumbag. He breaks into this party, he takes a dump in the he does an upper decker in the toilet at this house, and he's like stealing jewelry, and he comes outside, and this guy is asking him who, how he knows, so and so from, who's at the party, and like he's like, oh yeah, I know her from work. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm calling the police. And so like, good on the guy for fucking pointing out, but I mean, like the guy's just gonna stand there while you're calling the police, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, and he walks out into the woods after this all, the bad guy walks out into the woods after this all happens, and they are his two accomplices are there, like a younger girl, I should say a girl that's like in her 20s, and a guy that's probably in his late 40s, early 50s or something. And Ruth is going around with Tony, and they're investigating it. They go to this consignment shop where, because they figured out that the laptop had been sold at a consignment shop, and that was why the person at the address for the device finder had it. So they go and try and figure out if there's any more of her shit at that consignment shop. And like, they figure out that the guy that robbed her house is there, and they figure out what his tags are, and they look him up, and they figure out where he lives. And then it's like they go to this house, and this woman answers the door. You don't really know who she is. You assume like she's the mother or something. And it's like they go in and talk to her and try and figure out what's going on. And it's like they are fucking, the lady is a fucking trip. Like, she is just ridiculous. And she's just, it basically is revealed that the only reason she let them in was because she was bored out of her fucking mind, and she just wanted something to do, which is funny. And so they're trying to find this kid, and it turns out that the kid hasn't really been around much lately. The dad comes home, he's not really giving them any information, and Ruth and Tony basically get forced by the dad's bodyguard to leave because they're, not really police officers like they said they were, and all this shit. I mean, it's just all this shit's rolling up, and like Ruth and Tony go to leave, they're getting yelled at by the people in this house, and then Ruth decides she is gonna fucking have a mental breakdown and destroy some lawn ornaments here, and she's going to steal this lawn ornament tiger thing, and she's clearly not in a good place. And Tony is like really pissed at her for stealing this tiger because it's not hers. She's doing what she said she was trying to stop stop having happened, it's like, yeah, okay, I get that. And Tony's kind of like pissed at her, and she's like, yeah, I get it, whatever. And it doesn't seem like she's very apologetic about the whole thing, but it's like she goes, and she goes home after she drops him off, and when she goes in her house, the Chris is the bad guy's name that robbed her house, and he is literally in her house, and she's like standing at this, this counter by her front door, and Chris thought it would be a good idea to like startle her, to like intimidate her, and he basically is like, he asks her a question, and she like freaks out, and she's like and like fucking turns and hits him in the neck and like crushes his windpipe, and he goes out running down the street, and like kind of, I guess, sauntering a little more than running, but he goes down the street and he is just covering his neck, and he can't figure out what to do, and next thing you know, he fucking runs into this intersection and gets hit by a fucking bus and dies, and it's like, wow. And so the two accomplices he had kidnap Ruth, and they take her back to the house where she stole the tiger from, that Chris's parents live, and it's actually Chris's dad and stepmom, and they have this plan that they're going to rob the dad because they think he has this big cache of money, and he's holding on to it, and he's got it in a safe or something. And it's like they force Ruth to get them in the door, and then, they make her carry an unloaded gun, and she's all tied up and shit, it gets fucking gruesome. It gets really over the top, but I fucking loved every minute of it. I really enjoyed it. And, she's trying to like de-escalate the situation, I guess you would say. And so she's trying to get people to realize that she's not a bad person. She's not doing this, and that they forced her to do this and all this stuff. And it's pretty nifty from that standpoint. I really like what they do with that. There's a lot of gore in this sequence, and I gotta say, like, the overall theme of this movie is very important. Like, it's a very good theme. It's like, basically the message is that, the way you perceive everybody is, it might be that they're assholes, and they very might well be assholes, but at the same time, there are people out there that they just do stuff without thinking about it, and although they shouldn't do it, it's not like they're doing it with the intent of hurting anybody, and they really don't mean anything bad by it, and you really gotta kind of like give people a chance. You can't just assume everybody is a fucking asshole, but it's also easier to assume everybody's an asshole, so do what you gotta do. So some of the praise points for this movie are all the acting, especially that of the two leads, is very superb. The story makes me not only want to be a better person, but also it makes me want to reconsider the way I think about other people. The plot was pretty fucking great. I did not realize, I never knew at any point in the movie where the plot was going, Obviously, she figures out that something happened, where the people bought the laptop from the consignment shop, so that they're going to the consignment shop, but I would say you don't know very far ahead of time what's coming in the plot. I'm really hoping to see more from this director soon. Like, that was the only thing I was disappointed by, is it's like, he made this movie 5 years ago, and he hasn't had a follow-up at all, so I honestly don't really have a lot of criticism for this movie. It's one of, if not the best movie that I've watched this year. I really fucking loved it. So there's a little bit of trivia. Like, Macon Blair, like I mentioned, he considers this a companion piece to the movie Falling Down from 1993, starring Michael Douglas. And I got a couple of IMDb nuggets. Okay. This movie features two actors who also are in classic horror film remakes: Jane Levy from 2013's Evil Dead, and Derek Mears from 2009's Friday the 13th. That is like the bottom of the barrel trivia. That's not particularly special or interesting. It's just like, oh, they were in horror movie remakes. Okay, like, I need a little more than that. I need something to pique my interest. Of all of the things stolen from Ruth, the only thing she never recovered was her medications, which, yes, that's kind of how medication works. If you take medication, it goes away and you can't get it back. So there's that. The runtime of this film was 96 minutes, unknown budget, unknown worldwide gross, IMDb rating of 6.9, Rotten Tomato critics score 89%, Rotten Tomato audience score 77%, my own personal rating 5 out of 5 stars. Both of these movies are on Netflix. Please check them out. Obviously, if you think of, I'm trying to vary, like how I'm doing the format of these episodes. I'm thinking I might throw, I was just going to do the 3 ones, the bad, the new to me, and the favorites. And then I think I might throw in like classics. And I know in like October, I'm going to throw in Halloween type movies, horror movies and just more in that genre. So I'm excited to see where I can go with this. I don't know how I'm gonna roll, but yeah, so that's that. Thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it. I can't wait to record my next episode. That's just how much fun it is. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your day. Brandon at Random Reviews is performed, written, directed, produced, and edited by Brandon Griffiths. Theme music is performed by Augusto Diniz from Fiverr.